Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The WBA has ranked Christopher Lovejoy in its top 15 in the latest update. The unbeaten American heavyweight, 19-0, he's at number 14. And Lovejoy said it was going to happen. He's been saying for the past week or two that he has a title fight coming up with Trevor Bryan that's going to be on September the 26th on Impact Network. And I know a lot of people didn't believe him, but he said the next step would be he'd get ranked in the latest update and then the fight would be announced. Because obviously a champion or so-called champion in Trevor Bryan who holds the interim title, he can't face someone outside of the top 15. So the barrier to that fight being made or officially announced was Lovejoy wasn't even in the picture, but now he is. So there's a couple of things to go through with this whole situation, because in one way it's a complete farce, just because, I mean, what do the rankings matter? It's just completely gamed, and this is so deliberate. It's obvious, obviously corrupt to some extent. What weight do the rankings actually carry if you're just siphoning someone straight in, dropping them in, parachuting them in, and they get that title shot that others would have wanted, who are in the top 15 to have the opportunity to have? So that in itself raises a lot of red flags. And if we look at the top 15, and we'll go through the top 15 a little bit later, but you've got a number of guys who would love to have the opportunity to face a guy like Trevor Bryan. If there was an order that came through from the WBA, I mean, just think, Luis Ortiz. I mean, remembering, he was ranked in the WBA for several years, so I'm sure he would think that would be just reward for sort of sticking it out and going that route, because the WBA ends up becoming like this Twilight Zone sort of vortex. Guys fight for titles and then never seem to fight again, a la Trevor Bryan being out of the ring for 2 years and Manuel Char almost 3. And sometimes these guys, things befall them when they have, either the regular title, I'm talking about going back years now, but it seems to be a slippery slope when you go down that route. And because there is so many belts and it's so congested, it feels like some guys probably aren't making any traction at all. I mean, think guys like who you can see in the rankings. This is the top 15. Michael Hunter would jump at a chance to fight for some sort of strap. Other guys in here as well. Someone like Chris Arreola, who's already had 3 shots, he'd do, is surely. Charles Martin, Adam Kovnarski, all of these guys, if it meant some hardware that they could leverage into something bigger and better and deem themselves some version of a world champion. This is what they're in the game for. It's money, opportunity, and legacy. So this fight, I mean, you have to ask, how did it even come off? Remembering, and this is not meant to be any disrespect to Christopher Lovejoy, because clearly the guy is hilarious. If you followed his Instagram, the guy is hilarious. And he's talked himself, if this fight is announced soon, he's talked himself into it. Bearing in mind, 19-0, he's only faced one guy with a winning record. He's been fighting off TV down in Tijuana in Mexico, and, against guys with really bad records. To the extent that his current world ranking as deemed by BoxRec, and I know not everyone thinks BoxRec is perfect, but in terms of, some guys being 5 or 10 places higher than the other, you can bicker about that. But Lovejoy's position is world number, at the time of this video being recorded, 422 in the world out of 1,350. So, he is pretty far down the pecking order in terms of the guys that he's fought and the ratings, the points that they provided him for his resume, which clearly it demonstrates terrible opponents. And the last 2 guys that he fought, bear in mind, he's only had 2 fights since the start of 2019, and we're now into August of 2020. The 2 fights, a guy called Misael Sanchez, that was January this year, 15 losses on the record. The guy previously, Daniel Ucapicio, butchering that, no doubt. He was actually under the heavyweight limit, but he had a record of 6-50. So, yeah, I mean, how on merit would you ever rank Lovejoy in the top 15? And this is where it becomes, it's not necessarily often about merit. It's who you know, the positioning and bartering and bargaining behind the scenes, and probably some brown envelopes changing hands. And the WBA is pretty slippery on this sort of front with the rankings. And I mentioned Chris Ariola's name before. He was parachuted into the rankings a month ago. Hasn't really had anything of note, no wins of notes recently, and he gets parachuted in at number 7. Clearly, the WBA is going to sign off on some fight that he's about to be announced in, which no doubt will be against Andy Ruiz Jr., the slated tune-up that Andy Ruiz Jr. said that he wanted. January of this year, you have Robert Helenius also parachuted into the rankings, a similar sort of position to Ariola, and that was for the Kovnatsky fight. And prior to Helenius, because clearly the opponent must have changed, all of a sudden it was Christian Hammer. But it changed when the opponent must have changed. So they were bringing those guys in to be in the top 15 to have as an eliminator. Ultimately, it backfired for Kovnatsky. So, make of that what you will. But you have Helenius now as the gold champion, and that was an eliminator. Who knows what it was an eliminator for? What, to get one of the various titles that was on the line that the WBA has, and no doubt creating more. And if you didn't catch the piece I did a few weeks ago, just tearing into the WBA about justifying why having so many titles. But the unsaid thing there from them was, it generates money. Really, that's all it's about. And this is another example here where it's not about merit. It's not about guys earning their way up the pecking order to some sort of title shot. Because you would think with having 4 so-called champions in the WBA that they'd be having eliminators galore, or title shots galore. I mean, Anthony Joshua, the super champion, and prior to that, Ruiz, who won the belt from Joshua, they're the only guys who've been fighting that have been holding anything. So it's kind of, ridiculous to say the least. So, and in this case, and I mentioned this in my previous video where I talked about Lovejoy talking about the title shot that he's going to get. Trevor Bryan's been out of the ring for 2 years. Lovejoy is, number 422 in the world at the point that I'm recording this video. I mean, these guys have been out of sight, out of mind. Lovejoy's record is padded beyond belief. Trevor Bryan's is also heavily padded. He faced, 3 guys before he fought BJ Flores that had like 70 collective losses, 74 or whatever it was. How much credit can we give either guy for the win, no matter how the fight turns out? Because I don't think we have a true stare on how good they are. But this is clearly Don King, Trevor Bryan's promoter, wielding some influence. He probably knows where all the, the bodies are buried, etc., and pulling some strings to get a ranking. Lovejoy has already said that he's had a deposit from King. So, given that he said he was going to be ranked, and it's turned out that he has been ranked, just a week or so after he said it. I mean, I would think this fight's going to be announced soon. And given he said the deposit has cleared, I'm inclined to believe what he's saying, because why would he say any of this if it hadn't have happened? I know that Lovejoy does like to talk things up, talks a big game, and sometimes it's just hot air, but this is panning out. The ranking has happened. Out of nowhere, he gets ranked again. And it's not on merit, because he fought a out-and-out journeyman, the best part of 7 months ago. And prior to that, it was almost a year before his last fight. So, yeah, the rankings update, it exposes the WBA again for the shonky and shoddy organization that it has just devolved into being the oldest heavyweight sort of strap, and remembering it didn't start out as the WBA, it morphed into that. But it really is sort of erased the bottom right now for the WBA and its actions. Clearly about clipping the ticket, delivering favors, or, potentially taking some incentives from promoters or whoever. But Lovejoy, I like the guy. He's hilarious on social media, but getting ranked, I mean, it's, a real stretch to suggest he's earned it, let alone to get a so-called title shot against Trevor Bryan, who himself didn't earn a title shot, shouldn't have had a vacant belt. Well, they created it, actually. They put it on the line for him versus BJ Flores. No one needed that, but it happened. So, you can tell I'm a little bit sort of miffed at what's happened here, but it is ridiculous. But the ranking's proper. The top 15, not a whole lot of change. You have Christopher Lovejoy coming in, and the guy who, it was quite funny because Mladen Milas, he was at number 14 last month. He's been ranked consecutively for a year. WBN did a story. Obviously, they don't check the rankings very often. They must have been sort of digging around for a story. They said the rankings for July had a shock surprise, and it was Mladen Malas, out of nowhere, and they went into his record. I mean, do people not do a fact check, or even just, does it not matter about the actual information and whether it's correct or not? I mean, come on. I mean, the guy had been ranked for a full year, like a full 12 months, but now he's gone. A guy who has made a slight move up the rankings, because everything else is basically the same, is Arjit Kabayel. He fought recently, blew out Evgenius Lazaridis, or not blew out, but he got some good rounds in there, and obviously he got a win. A lot of other guys on this list that haven't fought, but it's still headed by Trevor Bryan, who is the interim champion. You have Usyk, he's at number 2. Then you have the PBC fighters, Luis Ortiz, Andy Ruiz, Adam Kovnatski, Charles Martin, Chris Arreola. They are sort of 3 through 7. Kabayel at 8, as I mentioned. Hunter, Derek Chisora, Kubrat Pulev, they're all dropping down a spot this month, as are Fire Jagba and Sergey Kuzmin. Freza Kendo eternally in the rankings and this is another thing. WBN said that Freza Kendo had dramatically dropped from 3 to 15. The guy's been at number 15 for ages. I'm talking about like last year. Whether they have a file and a screenshot from a year ago, I don't know, but clearly they haven't been keeping their finger on the pulse, because I'm like, why are they making a big deal of this now? And the Malat stuff, the whole talking about the farcical nature of the rankings, that's one thing, but why they're just making stuff up, literally making stuff up, and not even, checking, is this actually right? Because that's the sort of thing that it was easy to check. They clearly haven't kept up with it. It was a facepalm from them. But anyway, I'm ranting a bit now, but drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.